Hey, leaders, what if play was the key to unlocking deeper learning and engagement in our schools? Today, we're joined by an educator who is on a mission to disrupt traditional education through hands-on play-based learning.
Intentional and purposeful focus on building a culture of collaboration is the secret for leaders striving to make a difference. In building a culture of collaboration, Kurtis and Lorna Hewson will share simple tips, ideas, and strategies to take your organization's collaborative efforts to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of Building a Culture of Collaboration. As always, I'm Lorna Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Kurtis Hewson. Today we're joined by Dan Thomas, a veteran STEM and CTE teacher or educator, Lego trainer, and advocate for play-based learning with a passion for integrating project-based learning, computational thinking, and hands-on STEM experiences. Dan works with teachers and students to foster creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. I first came to know Dan as the host of the Tech Ed Clubhouse Podcast, where he explores topics in education, EdTech, and golf. So we're excited to dive into his insights on engagement, innovation, and the power of play in learning. And we also want to connect it to how does that impact highly impactful cultures of collaboration. So let's get started. Dan, great to have you here, my friend.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Excited for our conversations.
Yeah. So, when we hear play-based learning, my head instantly goes to a kindergarten type scenario, early learning kind of thing. But this is not the type of play that you're suggesting, or is it? Explain to us what that means of shifting from our traditional education to one that is play-based, hands-on.
How long do you got?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how long the laptop battery. Go for it, my friend.
So often in school, we kind of take the play out of the kids, right? We test it out of them. They start playing the game of school. And when I talk about play, I'm not necessarily talking about, getting out board games or playing kickball in the classroom or something like that. I'm talking about playing with the ideas and the concepts and taking that curiosity that we had as kids in that pre-K and K space and making it gearing it towards what are we learning in the classroom? Because I do a lot, like you said, I do a lot of hands-on stuff. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is, hey, we're playing, like right now in my classroom, we're doing mousetrap cars, right? So we're playing with that. We're out in the hallway. We're shooting them down the hallway. They're exploding, they're kerning into the walls. We're having fun with it, right? We're trying things because so many times our kids get into the classroom and they're afraid to make the mistake because it's a one and done test. They got the worksheet or the test or the quiz or whatever, and the teacher grades it and they give it back and nothing happens with it. Mm-hmm. Right. But that's not how life is. That's not how these kids are going to succeed outside the classroom. We want them to build that mindset of growth, of play, of curiosity, of iteration, lots of different things like that. So play is, sometimes it's getting out Lego bricks. Mm-hmm. A lot of times for me, it's getting out Lego bricks. And it could be pulling out a board game. It could be tossing a ball around the classroom. It could be just doing something weird and goofy, like a popsicle or a Go Noodle thing, something like that. But sometimes it's just interacting with the content.
Well, and I think that's really key. And we're going to get to the connection because I think there's a massive connection for how we work as adults learning in collaborative teams as well. But like I reflect on probably 5 years ago, learning the game of Catan. And the first time you play, you go, okay, I've figured out a strategy that I'm going to try next time. And you play again and go, okay, I'm going to refine that strategy a little bit more. Next time you win by total accident and reflect on what did I do that led to that? How could I replicate? And I mean, there's failures that you'll have, but you'll learn from that. And to me, that was really critical learning. And the fact that I enjoyed being that and not seeing that I lost the game, so I'm a failure. No, of course not. I learned something while trying to figure out the strategies.
And I tell my, part of the things, I like sports, obviously. I like golf. One of the other things that, I got a lot of kids that play baseball.
Yeah.
right? And I tell them, what's a good batting average for a baseball player, right? Baseball players' good batting average is like 300, right? So that means, and if he gets up 3 or 4 times in a game, he's successful 1 out of 3 or 4 times, and that's a good day, right?
Yeah.
And so we got to get that mindset back to our kids, because I don't think our kids, like, we schedule play, right? You schedule your game time. Think about, you have kids, I'm as guilty of this. Hey, we're going to play from 4 to 5. No, and we schedule it. It's not spontaneous. When I was, a kid in the late 1900s, we got kicked out of the house. We drank out of the hose. The lights came on, the street lights came on. We went home. We made stuff up out in there. Kids don't get a chance to do that anymore.
Yeah. And even more in the classroom. And I started out as a grade 1 teacher, and I was there for a long time, and lots of opportunities for kids to learn through play, because that's kind of the nature of those, like we said, early years. But then even moving to grade 4 and grade 5, we begin to see a very different student by the time they get to, like, not, only 3 or 4 years down the road.
I'm sure you see it all the time in middle school
I struggle with that all the time.
Yeah, and just really thinking about how do whatever we are doing in that period of time, we've really dampened that curiosity and that love for exploration and that love for learning. How do we make sure that continues to be a part of who they are, not just as students, but all the way through, like, until adulthood?
Ooh, I mean, there's
That's a
part
hard
of that,
question.
part of that too. And I think about this, and I'm not, like, making this up, but there's sometimes, like, I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about things like this. I mean, it just goes through my head, and part of it is from home, to be honest with you. Part of it is parents that put the pressure of the grade on there.
Yeah.
So there's that. I mean, so it's all about that number on the corner of the paper, and things like that. So there's that, but part of it too is we just kind of test it out of them. And as adults, as the adult in the classroom, we don't play. I mean, think of a typical classroom you walk into.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed much since I was in school. I mean, I graduated high school in 1988.
Yeah.
I get the luxury of teaching at my old alma mater. So I'm back in the buildings I went to school in. And when I started teaching there, I was teaching with my teachers that were, I was now colleagues with them. So it was weird. But if you walk into a typical math classroom or a typical social studies classroom, what are you going to see? You're going to see the teacher at the front of the room with a smart board going that's got some type of presentation, kids sitting in cemetery rows taking notes and regurgitating that information on a test. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying that needs to go away, but now what do we do with that? Kids got this knowledge. We disseminated some knowledge. We don't have to be the sage on the stage all the time. There's a time for that.
Yeah.
Right. But what are we going to do with it? Because I was actually just interacting with some people on LinkedIn today, and one of the questions was about memorization versus mastery. And I'm like, the memorization comes from using it. All right. Like you playing your game of Catan, right? You knew the rules, but you didn't know the strategies and the concepts and the ideas till you started playing it.
Yeah.
And there's little things you learn through playing the game and through enjoyment of it that you can't explicitly teach. And I think that's where the power of the play is getting those skills that we can't necessarily, because you're not going to walk into a classroom and say, okay, today we're going to talk about collaboration, and we're going to do a study on creativity, or we're going to do a study on persistence or perseverance. We're not going to do that in a classroom. You're going to walk in and say, hey, today we're doing fractions, or we're going to study the Declaration of Independence, or whatever it may be. I know you guys are Canadian, and I'm not going to, there's.
We'll leave that part of the conversation
I'm just going to stop there.
for off camera. So, Dan, I'm interested. I was really enthralled with our conversation. I've listened to a number of your episodes on your podcast where you're talking about the play, the engagement, the real life learning experience in that classroom. I'm curious, in your mind, what are some of the things that you find in classrooms that are valuing play, engagement, real world learning? What would be some of those connections that you could extend to building a culture of collaboration across a school with the adults? Do you think that there's some parallel connections for how we, and for those that are listening, I'm air quoting right now, how we play in collaborative teams in schools?
Oh, this, like, I got a kind of a neat story there. So, and this kind of happened by accident, and I'll explain it here as we go. But in my school, we're all of our schools in our area are going through building projects. The state has money, and if you don't take the money, somebody else is. So, long story short, there's some remodeling, there's some building, there's some security issues that have to be built in, right? So, a couple of years ago, they were redoing our middle school office. And we had some tall bistro tables outside the office for the kids to sit at when they come in the morning, just kind of hangout space, right? Where they came from, I don't know. But they would one weekend they were tearing down the wall of the office because they were rebuilding it and reconfiguring the office and all this other stuff, right? So they had to, custodians pulled it out and put it outside my classroom because there's a reason my room's across from the office.
It's called proximity, my friend.
You got it. And a camera right outside my door.
Yeah.
But anyways, they put these two bistro tables outside my room. So I get there early enough. I went out and I sat at the bistro table. Just took my laptop out there and I'm sitting out there. All of a sudden, another teacher comes and sits down. And another teacher comes and another teacher. And then the kids show up. And now we're having conversations like this. We're just having natural conversations. So much so that the guy that is in the room next door to me took one of the tables, put it outside his room, and we called them neighborhoods. And this is all just by accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is because this is one of those things that if the administration came in and said, "Hey, Kurtis, we want you to take this table and we want you to sit outside your classroom every morning from 7 to 7:30," you'd be like,
And even better,
Sure. Why?
I recently read some research of why bistro tables outside the classroom can increase student achievement.
Right. So you got that. So this is all organic stuff. And now all of a sudden, the principal's finding tables and chairs, and every classroom has a table outside of it. Now kids are out in the hall working during class time. I still sit there every morning and I have conversations with teachers that I wouldn't normally have if I'm sitting in my classroom. So by doing that, we have these conversations like this. Now we'll talk about some school stuff. We'll talk about just some stupid things. We'll talk, a little bit of politics, but I don't want to, that's just one of those things that is not the time or the place. Right. But it's just these natural little things that we have. And all of a sudden it blossomed into this amazing culture of just, we call them neighborhoods. So we sit out and we have coffee. The kids, like I said, the kids work there. And it's one of those things that if the administration came in and said, you're going to do it again, we're probably going to go, it's going to last a week. Oh, another fad that the principal wants to do. So you got to have those times. You got to be in the hallway and talk to the kids. And I think that bringing that into the classroom, bringing that mindset and that idea into the classroom where we're talking about projects and we're talking about play and we're talking about doing things. When that social studies teacher, and again, nothing against social studies teachers, I'm not signaling any other teachers out because there's a need for all of this stuff. And so it's all about balance too. But if you walk into a classroom where the teacher's at the front of the room and they got their massive desk and they're standing behind their desk and they're at the lectern and they're clicking the buttons on the PowerPoint and the kids are doodling, because, when I was there, we doodled in our notebooks. Now they have phone under their desk or they got their AirPod in behind their hoodie or whatever it is. That teacher's not talking to the kids. You're not having a conversation. You're not finding out about them. If we're doing a project, if we're doing, and it doesn't have to be a giant project, it can be just something that takes 20 minutes. You can walk around and have little conversations with the kids. So I can walk up and say, "Hey, Kurtis, how was your baseball game last night? How was your basketball game? How's your mom?" Because a lot of my kids, I had their parents as students because I've been there long enough, right? So we're having these conversations, which builds that culture. Because and I'm sure you've heard this. Yeah. Kids don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care.
Yeah.
So I'm preaching to the choir on that one, but you gotta have interactions, and they got to be a little bit. Now I'm a little sarcastic in the classroom. I know it's a surprise. So we have some, a little bit back and forth, but the kids that you can do that with, and the kids you can't do that with, because I don't care what you do, whether they're 5 years old in that K classroom or they're 18 and they're a high school senior, they're still kids.
Yeah.
Right. And we spend so much time with them that we forget that piece. So there's a lot there to unpack for you.
Yeah. And I want to unpack. I know Lorna's going to have some things here too, but a couple of things stand out to me and I'm thinking about from a leadership perspective of how do I mimic and replicate the classroom conditions that you're that you're sharing. And one is, how well do we know our team and how well do we know each other and how we can interact. But to me, I think what's really critical is this idea of, can we provide autonomy within our building? The idea that we're not going to micromanage, come in and everyone's going to have a bistro table. You're going to sit there from 7 to 7:30, but to create the space where people can just, like you said, organically share. Hey, this is something that I'm trying, seems to be going okay. Someone else says, I'm interested in learning a little bit more about that. I think I could put that in it. That idea of you still have autonomy in being able to engage in what is best for kids and for learning within the building, but that a leader's creating opportunities for that to happen, that it's not just accidental.
And when you talk about a leader too, we're not necessarily just talking about the building leader.
No,
right? We're not talking the principal. It could be the custodian.
Yeah.
Great.
It could, and they're a very important part of the school. It could be one of the paraprofessionals. It could be the school secretary. It's not leader by title. It's leader by, and maybe it's just, hey, you show up with a bistro table outside your classroom. Maybe you just pull a desk outside your classroom.
Yeah.
Just for the day.
Well, I love that idea that your neighborhood came about just organically.
We're getting there.
So, Dan, as you talk about that organic development of your neighborhoods, I can't help but think, that was something that you didn't anticipate. You didn't do it intentionally, that it just happened. But how do we take the learnings from that and really think about how do we intentionally create an environment of that has that culture of play?
We'll be right back to continue this episode. If you're all about creating a culture of collaboration, then clarity is the key to making it work. But let's be real, gaining clarity as a leader isn't always easy. That's where Casey Watts comes in. On Catching Up with Casey, she breaks down what it takes to build cohesive, vision-driven teams with real talk, practical strategies, and a little bit of fun along the way. Tune in live every Monday or catch the replay anytime on your favorite podcast platform. And now back to our conversation.
You got to be a person first, right? We're people first. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yeah.
But we're people. You got to be a human being before you can be a teacher. You got to be, and you got to be who you are too, because the kids are going to know if you're trying to be somebody or not. And a lot of times you get that just by, going to the classroom again and again and again and teaching for a few years and doing that stuff. So you learn who you are the older you get. but yeah, I mean, you just got to be honest. You got to be organic. You just got to be you and have, and bring out whatever it is. Because, we've all tried to be that person. We've all tried to be that awesome lesson plan and put on the dog and pony show for when the admins come in. Um, but I'm in such a school that if I'm not doing my job, they know, right? We don't have to put on the dog and pony show. Just be you. Just have some, you know, and just kind of a little bit like my backstory, just to give you an idea here. There's a story I'm going to share in later on down the road here, but long story short, I grew up playing. I grew up tinkering. I grew up doing things. That's what my dad did. That was our house. We fixed things. We built things, right? And I think I shared this maybe with you, Kurtis, earlier, and on my podcast. But story goes, my dad was playing with a car radio, and he's trying to get it to work, and couldn't get it to work. And we're spending a couple hours on this car radio down in the basement because he just wanted to listen to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother shows up and he goes, "Hey, why don't you just go to Walmart and buy one for $20?" And my dad goes, "Where's the fun in that?" And that kind of, right, that right there, that simple little question of where's the fun in that kind of is the essence of what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I could go buy a mousetrap car. It's going to go down the street. I could go to Teachers Pay Teachers and get this awesome lesson. Where's the fun in that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the fun in doing something, in writing an essay all the time? And again, there's a place for all of that stuff, and I'm not discounting any of that stuff whatsoever. But how can we incorporate some fun into that and get a kid's take on it? Because kids are pretty creative if you let them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's us that holds them back. A lot of times it's us as teachers, as adults, that holds them back.
Yeah. So Dan, I'm curious. As you mentioned, a number of years in the classroom, you undoubtedly have worked with different leaders in different roles, like you said, whether that's formalized roles or informal roles within the school.
Mm-hmm.
Love to hear from your perspective. What are some things that you've seen that have promoted high degrees of collaboration and innovative thinking within the schools? And then conversely, what are some things that you've experienced that kill that kind of ingenuity within the adult, particularly in the building?
Well, I've been lucky enough that I don't have a lot of that negative side of that. I'm in a great situation, and I tell my teachers that I work with that we're spoiled where we are because we got an amazing administration. I've been there for 32 years. I've gone through 3 or 4 different superintendents. I've gone through a couple different principals. And they're all awesome. I mean, they're all very supportive of what we do. Mm-hmm. And so I haven't really dealt with the negative, like the micromanaging, like you got to do this, you got to give me your lesson plans for the week in advance and all that stuff. Cause really, who's that for at the end of the day? Who's that? Cause if you're an administrator, you're probably not reading 60 sets of lesson plans. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But no, they just they let us do what we do. And to be honest with you, they show up in our classroom. Just 5 minutes, walk through, talk to the kids, and they're out in the hallways and they're accessible and they're friends. They're, you know what I mean? They're not it's not a boss.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a hierarchy relationship. Yeah.
No, I mean, a lot of school districts will grieve this or that or the other thing. Our school doesn't file like teacher admin grievances, because I can walk into the superintendent's office and say, "Hey, I got this coming up." In fact, I got an email today, and I got to talk to my principal that my classroom was asked to be on something, and if I walk in and say, "Hey, can I do this?" He's going to be like, "Yeah, I love it. Let's go. What do you need?"
Yeah. I love that question. What do you need?
What can I do to support that? Yeah. Can we be, and it's awesome to have that. And again, I'm spoiled in doing that. And I know that. And by doing my podcasts and talks like this and going to conferences, I'm meeting people and I'm, and they have awesome stories too, as you found out, I'm sure, talking to a lot of people.
Oh, of course.
But we also hear the horror stories because we don't hear those super awesome stories a lot of times, like the bistro tables in the hallway.
Yeah.
But we hear about the fights, and we hear about the cell phones, and we hear about the this and the bad thing, and the teachers are not doing this, and the students are this. If you watch The Breakfast Club, from the late 80s,
Yep.
and you walk down a high school hallway today, you're going to see the exact same thing. It's going to be a little bit different, but you're going to have the jocks, and you're going to have the dorks, and you're going to have the preppy girls, and you're going to have all that. You have that dynamic. It's not going to change. High school hasn't changed. The dynamics. I mean, and it carries into but it just, there's a little bit that changes, but it's still there. And they're people, and they're kids, and they have stuff going on. Yeah. So you just got to be a person, and you got to have fun with it, and ask the question. If you don't ask the question, you don't know, and don't run in it. And, I'm not saying like we want to run in and go, hey, little Johnny was doing this. It's like, hey, Greg, he's my principal. I'm like, how was your drive in today? How's your golf game? How's whatever, so we're there's interest both ways. Right. And you can make fun of each other a little bit, and have that because, you can. And if you do that on the adult level, that trickles down to the kids.
Yeah,
it really does. When the kids see the adults getting along, and the adults having fun, and the adults as a teacher, being able to say, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Let's go look.
Well, that's a powerful statement in a classroom, but powerful statement in a staff room too. Of being able to say, I'm not sure, but let's figure that out together.
Right. Because so there's lots of stuff going on. I mean, there's lots of dynamics, and it all boils down to connections, and it all boils down to being a person.
Yeah.
Right. You got an admin. He's got stresses, or she's got stresses that they're dealing with. You got a superintendent that you don't know what they're dealing with. I don't know all the discipline stuff going on. I don't know the parent emails that they get, but you know what? You can say good morning. You can say please. You can say thank you. Right. And that's where your collaboration, that's where your community, and that's where your connections start. Simple little things like that are kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Dan, curious, I know that you have a next step that's coming for you, and I understand you may not be ready to share all in this bit of a public setting, but what are you looking at as far as your next steps as the role that you've held for the last 32 years? I know that you've shared with us retirement of that classroom piece is on the horizon, but there's steps beyond. What are you thinking? What's the future hold for you? We'll be right back to continue this episode. Are you meeting with your team in the hallway, staff room, conference room, or at the back of a classroom? We know that physical space is at a premium in most buildings. However, it is important to consider the impact that your meeting space has on the functioning and well-being of your team. Download our free Leader's Guide for planning spaces for collaboration. This guide will help to determine and plan for the best space for your teams, including considerations that contribute to effective meeting spaces, a checklist to be used when planning the space, and other additional resources. Access the guide at bit.ly/space checklist. That's bit.ly/space checklist, all one word. Get ready to ensure your meeting space is optimally configured to have the greatest impact possible for your next team meeting. And now back to our conversation.
I want to get out there, and I really want to take this message, and I've had, since COVID, I've been kind of on this thing, and I've reached out to people. Like, I think I met you through Teach Better.
Yeah.
I think that's where it was. On the community, edu creator community, I believe it is, and awesome awesome place. Again, another place where there's genuine people. And I find that, if you reach out to people on social media, the people that are really in the room doing the thing aren't gatekeeping their information.
No.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to do that. I want to go out and I want to walk into your school and I want to say, hey, let's do this. Because, if I do a session at a conference or if I'm doing a PD session, my goal, and that's what I want to do when I'm done, is do some of those things. My goal is that you can go into your classroom tomorrow and do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
Not you can go into your classroom in 3 months and do something with it, or this was a checklist. But I want to give you some practical common sense strategies that you can use tomorrow. And now, if that's a 5-minute thing, if it's a 2-week project, right? Because teachers are doing some awesome stuff. They just need that tweak. They just need that aha moment. And that's what. So I want to get out there. I want to interview people. I want to go to conferences. I want to come into your school, and I want to do some of that stuff, and just kind of get the PBL, the project-based learning message out there, the play learning, and just having fun with our jobs. Because if you're having fun, it's not work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to be able to get out there and share those ideas. And I know that for teachers, being able to go to professional learning and not focused solely on the theory behind it, but actually, what does it look like when I take this back to my classroom, and how do I engage in that playful way of learning so that my students are super engaged. And I think that's an exciting.
So Dan, if someone wanted to have a conversation with you about this, a school get in touch, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I'm on all the socials. I mean, you can reach out to me there. I've been active on LinkedIn a lot, so you can catch me on LinkedIn. There seems to be a very good growing educational community on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. There's some great people out there. So my social media handles at Coach Thomas Tech. That's my company. That's my website, coachthomas.tech.com. You can reach me at an email, coachthomastech@gmail. And that's where you can find me. One of the things I do, and I don't know if you know this, Kurtis, and I've been doing it for about 5 years, is I post a selfie and a dad joke every morning on my social media platforms.
Okay.
In the cringier, the better. And the dad jokes are all school appropriate. Because a number of people that I talk to use them in their slide decks, and like the morning slide decks and stuff like that. But yeah, so I post a good selfie and a dad joke, and that's, again, just having some fun with that. And the number of people that I meet that say, love your jokes every day. It's one of the first things that I look at when I get to school. I look at, or when I pick up my phone in the morning when I'm out of the bathroom. You're the first one that comes up, and I love the dad jokes, and it's just fun. Again, it's having some fun with what you're doing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
and I'm for them.
And I'm glad that you get to hear that, because I don't hear anybody say I like your dad jokes, and usually it's from those that call me dad. So
well, yeah, they're very unappreciative.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, it's been a pleasure once again, and I hope that this is not the last time that we have a chance to connect. Wishing you all the best, and just hope that message that you're continuing to promote continues to gain traction. Awesome work, my friend.
I love doing it. I like to tell people I haven't worked a day in my life. I love doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't change it for the world. And we'll see where it goes. Reach out to me. It was my pleasure to be here talking to you guys. Can't wait to meet in person at some point.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
would be great.
All right. We wish you all the best, Dan. Take care.
Thank you.
So that's the second conversation I've had with Dan. I had the chance to join his podcast as well for a conversation. And what I love is it comes through loud and clear in each of those of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a great reminder, as he shared, for leading a culture of collaboration. If you can't have individuals be their authentic selves, in that, we're always going to have barriers or difficulties moving forward. So just like in the classroom, can I show up for the kids? How can we as adults show up for each other to increase our learning and actually our ability and willingness to take risks, which we know is a huge part of effective collaboration.
Yeah, and just, the joy that's there in talking about his stories, talking about his classroom, talking about his interactions with adults. And I love that idea of being open for organic things to happen, being aware that, when you create that culture where there are possibilities, then lots of things can happen.
Yeah. And you know what? We've really taken a focus on how do leaders build a culture of collaboration. But it was a great reminder for Dan of actually everyone in that culture is a leader. And it goes back to something that another guest, Dr. Brad Gustafson, talked about of a sympathetic resonance and the idea that if my messages can be shared in time, they're going to proliferate, spread, ripple out to others and impact. And so just like that whole story of the bistro table
I love
for
that.
Brad, that didn't have to come from a formalized leadership position, but everyone plays a role in that culture.
And matter of fact,
risk-taking.
It wouldn't have probably generated the same way had it come in that intentional space. But because it was organic, it just happened. And then it grew from that. It becomes truly a part of their culture. So, another thing that Dan talked about is, and I love this question, what's the fun in that?
Yeah.
Like if you could always ask yourself, trying to determine your next steps or in some planning that you're doing, being able to ask the question, what's the fun in that?
Yeah, right? I love that as a great question reminder. And I think one of the takeaways I want to take from this conversation is create the conditions for that organic to happen. It doesn't have to happen by accident within our organizations. We can create conditions and opportunities for true, authentic collaboration to be able to happen.
Well, and I think even creating the conditions to me is that we're setting ourselves up. But I think the one step further is being open to having things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So as always, check out the show notes for some further information to be able to connect with Dan. And yeah, the great person to be able to bring into your organization to help reinforce that culture of play. So thanks to Dan and thanks to you viewers and listeners for joining us once again. We wish you all the best.
See you soon.
Jigsaw Learning, founded by Kurtis and Lorna Hewson, is a team of educators who work with schools, districts, and educational leaders to establish collaborative response to ensure success for all students. Because every child deserves a team.